Hi, for today's part of the stitches, we are basically going to just concentrate on doing the next stitch, which the next stitch we're going to do is the honeycomb stitch. And it's fairly simple. The biggest problem you are going to have is you're going to learn to read your stitches, and we will do that in a moment. But basically, the first part of the stitch, we will start with the regular Tunisian simple stitch. The following stitch, we will do a purl stitch. And then we're going to do a Tunisian. Then we'll do the purl stitch. And that's all. Those are the only two stitches that you need to know for the honeycomb stitch. And basically you're just going to repeat every other one to the end. And you should, when you get through, if you've been doing this as a scarf with the 20 stitches, you should wind up with 20 stitches at the very end. And I will tell you there are several ways to start this. If you follow Creative Grandma, she has always done it with a base of starting with an uneven number, starting off with the purl stitch. Actually, she changed uneven, does the first regular Afghan stitch, which is just, simple Tunisian simple stitch. And then after she does that first row in the Tunisian simple stitch, she actually chains one and then begins the stitch for the honeycomb. That is absolutely, there's no correct or wrong way to do it. The way she's doing it, it comes out really nicely as well. But, I find it doesn't matter if you have an uneven or an even number of stitches. You're basically just going to do the same thing over and over. Let me get some more yarn here. And that is the only stitch we are going to do today, is the honeycomb stitch. And I will tell you, a lot of people do take the time to actually write out a nice little thing for them to remember how to do the honeycomb stitch, which if you have ever done the lemon peel stitch, basically it's you do one stitch in one. When you return, you do the opposite. That's what you're going to do with the honeycomb stitch. Now, we're going to learn to read these stitches, and what you will notice, the simplest thing to remember is this first stitch is Tunisian simple stitch, and you know that because you have two bars, one under the other. So for the next stitch on the next row, you would do a purl stitch. Maybe, if you can get it under there. Yarn's in the way, guys. You would do that purl stitch right there. And when I say read, just like in knitting, knitting has a bump on the purl stitch. And you see that there on that stitch, that's our second stitch. But for that stitch, we are simply going to do Tunisian simple stitch. And that's what I mean, you're going to be doing the opposites in each stitch. The next stitch is Tunisian simple, so you want to put in a purl stitch. If I can get it away from the yarn. Again, you have a bump there, that's a purl, so you're going to put a Tunisian simple stitch in the purl. We have a Tunisian simple stitch here. As you can see, it's one on top of the other. So you're going to put your purl stitch there. Come on, yarn. Then we have another purl, so we'll put a Tunisian simple stitch in the purl. Tunisian simple stitch here. So you're going to put purl stitch in that one. Purl. So you'll put the Tunisian simple stitch in the purl. You have Tunisian simple stitch there. And you will put a Tunisian purl. And that's basically what you're going to do all the way to the end. And I'm going to pause it and finish it like normal. And remember at that last stitch to go in under both of those bars so that that edge is real nice and simple. And the return pass, like I said, is exactly the same as it has always been. But now we get to this one and we see that our first stitch is a purl stitch. So for our next row, when the purl, you're going to do a Tunisian simple stitch and then a purl into the Tunisian simple stitch. And you're just going to alternate those stitches all along as long as you want to do this pattern for. Oh, good grief. Having trouble with those purls today, aren't I? And that is a purl because it has the bump. So we're going to do Tunisian simple stitch under it. If I can get it to get under there. Don't know why I'm having so much trouble today. Of course, I had a lot of trouble with words today too. With that firefighters from the earlier video. Kept saying firefighters. Okay. And now we're back to the simple stitch is our next stitch, so we want to do our purl. And get some more yarn there. And then we have our normal Tunisian stitch there. So we are going to do a purl. No, yes, purl. And you're going to repeat that as often as you want, as long as you want for this pattern repeat. And I will tell you this pattern, the honeycomb pattern, makes an absolutely stunning blanket, makes an absolutely stunning sweater, makes beautiful scarves. There's just a lot you can do with this one, and this seems to be a favorite among a lot of people who do Tunisian. And I think you can see why, because it makes that honeycomb effect. Now, we have only done 3 rows, so hopefully once we finish with this row, you'll be able to see that honeycomb effect happening. And this is a purl because there's the bump. And then we need to put a purl in this one. And then of course, as normal, you're going to go under the 2 bars for that last stitch. And then the return pass is normal as usual. Go yarn over, go through 1, yarn over, go through 2, and we do that all the way back to the end. You have to get some more yarn here. Oops. And hopefully when you lay it down, you can start to see that honeycomb right in here. Now, I am going to show you how, if you did that honeycomb as your last stitch, that you would end off, how you would end that stitch. It's done a little differently than most bind offs. So let me get that other piece that I'd started so you can see it. Now this piece I just did the honeycomb stitch on completely. And like I said, you can see what a beautiful pattern texture it makes. And one thing about Tunisian is it's stretchy, just like knit, so that's an advantage. Now normally when you would bind off, because we are in Tunisian crochet, you would bind off in this manner. You would simply go under and just do a simple like a simple stitch, pull through, and you would bind off. But honeycomb, you bind off a little differently. Basically, you are going to do get that back in there. Basically, all the way across, you're going to do the purl stitch to bind off. And that's simply doing the first motion. And instead of stopping there and leaving the hook on, you would simply pull all the way through, go to your next stitch, and this is, like I said, binding off. And this is the way that most people bind off when they have done a honeycomb stitch for their pattern, just because of the way the finished edges look. It gives it a little bit of a more polished, smooth look because you have chosen one stitch. And that purl stitch makes a nice bind off for this pattern. Like I said, it's just simply a purl stitch all the way across and pulling completely through both loops. Not real sure what's going on with my lights there, guys. Kind of blinking off and on, aren't they? And as the last, you're going to go under. And you could do this as a purl stitch too. Which, let's do that. Bring it down. Go through those 2 bars at the end. Yarn over and pull through 2. There is your bind off. Then you would simply do 1 and cut your thread, and then you've got that nice little bind off there. Okay, that's it for today's Tunisian. I think we're going to stop here as far as the cowl and let you continue to work on those other stitches as you choose. I am actually working on just doing some how-to different stitches on the Tunisian stitch, and then that way you can choose from those stitches so you can see. You can add as you want, or you could change it around. We've done quite a few stitches, so you can play around with all those different stitches in different orders again and see those. But other than that, I will be just doing simple Tunisian stitches in the future. And of course you could add to the cowl, or you could simply choose to do them at some other time. Like I said, the choice is yours. That's it for the Tunisian cowl for me. I'm going to play with those stitches we've already done and just mix them up a little bit more in my piece to be finished. And I have a long way to go to make a scarf. You know, this could go on forever and ever and ever with different stitches. Like I've told you, there's close to 300 or more stitches. And many times, depending on where you place your hook, you can change up the look of that stitch all the way around. We will be getting into a lot of other stitches, some lacy stitches, but like I said, those will be separate videos on their own so that you can learn some of the different Tunisian stitches. I hope everybody has enjoyed this, and I am looking forward to getting on with a knitting cowl. I am trying to pinpoint what I want to do with that, so give me about a week and then I will announce what we're going to do with that, and we'll just play with some knit stitches. So that's it, and hope everybody enjoyed it. And I know a lot of you have a lot of questions. Feel free to ask them. I'll try to answer as I go. Okay, everybody, have a great day. Bye.